Hey, welcome to Let It Be. I'm Vanessa, and this is my little corner of Music YouTube. Before I get into anything, I just want to pay tribute to someone we sadly lost this week, Chris Christopherson, a great songwriter and by most accounts that I have heard, a great person as well. So just wanted to take a minute to acknowledge that. I spend a lot of time on here talking about things that I'm getting rid of in my collection, but not a lot of time talking about what I'm bringing in. So, just going to do a good old fashioned record and CD haul, the stuff I brought in the last little bit, and a little bit about each thing, because it's always a little fun to see what people are bringing into their collection and listening to and all that. So, my plan of attack usually now is quite different from in the past. I don't want to bring in more stuff for should it stay or should it go. I don't, as much as it's fun to do that series, I don't really want to bring in more content. I'd rather just circulate through the stuff that I have and then move on and bring in stuff that I actually want. So I generally don't buy too much anymore that I haven't heard. But as you will see in what I have brought in, there are still a couple of things. Sometimes it is fun to take a chance, but usually it's a little more of an educated chance now. It's not so much a just, hey, oh, I've heard people like this. Why not? So anyway, without further ado, I guess I will start with the CDs. Because I collect both. I have pretty large collection of both formats, and I like them both for different reasons. And yeah, I don't see any reason to exclude either one. So first off, I've got 3 albums by the artist M. Ward, Post-War, Hold Time, and Transistor Radio. I recently did a dive of his entire catalog, and I loved it. Like, he has pretty well, all of his albums are good, obviously some better than others, but these 3 were ones that I really enjoyed and were near the top of my list. I'm still missing some favorites that I would like to get eventually, but Transistor Radio especially is probably my second favorite album of his. So it was really nice to be able to pick those up and now have them in my collection. He's just such a wonderful songwriter and enjoy his guitar playing and his voice. And he's just very consistent, really. I mean, even his worst stuff is still enjoyable and still good. So that is that. Um, Next up, we have something related to a recent video. I finally got the collection Made to Love Magic from Nick Drake, just a collection of some outtakes, mostly from Five Leaves Left, and some of the last songs that he recorded in his lifetime, and odds and ends here and there. I'd say that it is an essential collection for any Nick Drake fan, in addition to his albums. So I am happy to bring it in, and I listened to it a lot in that time frame where I was reading the book that I reviewed earlier that this fall, or I guess late in the summer. Yeah, I do just think that it was something that I needed to own. And I recommend it if you haven't heard it and you like him. Now, another album here that I brought in, I will be talking about soon, a lot more probably, or definitely. But I had to get it. It is The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway by Genesis, and I have absolutely fallen in love with this album. A little unexpectedly. I'm not necessarily a huge prog lover. It's still something I'm getting into the last few years. I was very resistant to it for a very long time, but I didn't really know much about it. So it was just me being closed-minded. And since I've opened up my mind to it, I have found that a lot that I really like. But this album did intimidate me, being a double album, being like a concept album. It was a little bit like, oh, but I really liked it the first time I heard it. And then I just kept going back to it. And then I have grown to love it. So I had to buy it, of course, because that's what you do when you love an album. So yeah, I will be talking about it more soon, though. Another album related to a year list. We have Mark Lanigan and Whiskey for the Holy Ghost. This is a 1994 album, and it just missed my top 15. It was actually my number 16 for the year. Just a wonderful album that I wouldn't say took me by surprise, but it did a little bit because I didn't really have any expectations for it. And the first time I heard it, I liked it a lot. But then going back to it is when it really hit. Like it's just one of those albums that sticks with you. So definitely recommend that. Um, and we have another 1974 album. Spent some time recently deep diving 1974, so there will be a video soon. But we have Bridge of Sighs by Robin Trower, which is an album that has definitely grown on me over time. And I think that it's one of those albums that just kind of does grow on you. My dad is a huge fan of Robin Trower, so I probably heard it sometimes growing up, but didn't really listen to it on my own until the last couple of years. So I found it at the record store and I had to pick it up. Something from a completely different era is Vampire Weekend and Modern Vampires of the City. This is a band that taken me a while to get into too. I don't know. I just didn't listen to them when they first came out. So I've really kind of caught up and gone back to them. And I really loved this album. So when I saw it, had to get it. They're just a really solid modern band that very consistent. If you like them, I think it's kind of one of those things. If you like one, you should like most of them. But then again, people are complicated. So now this has been a really cool discovery in a way, but something I had known about. So I'm going, without any further ado, Talk Show and their self-titled and only album from 1997. I did a dive recently of the Stone Temple Pilots, and that's really made my appreciation for them grow. I've always liked them. I really loved the singles from Tiny Music when they came out, when I was first getting into music as a preteen. I loved Big Bang Baby. It's probably one of my all-time favorite songs, really. And I remember this coming out, and I remember the single, and I remember the video, but it kind of just got, it wasn't a success. So it just sort of disappeared from my head. And then when I was going through and just reading about them, because usually when I dive an artist, I do some reading, and it came up and I was like, oh yeah, I remember that. I should listen to that album. And immediately when I heard Hello, Hello, I was like, oh yes, yes, I remember this song. And I looked up the music video and I was like, yep, I remember this music video. And it's just a shame that this project, which I guess I should explain, it's all the members of Stone Temple Pilots, other than Scott Weiland, because he was having some troubles at the time, so he was out of the band, and they had a new singer, and I am blanking on his name, so do not. Dave Coots. So he is different. He's a different kind of singer, but I think he really suits the music well. And there's a lot of great songs here. Like the single Hello, Hello is awesome, of course. But I think the whole album is just a really great time. And it is in a similar vein, a bit to Tiny Music, but it is its own thing. And if you like that album, you should check out this album, because it should not have been a failure at the time. Like, it should have been more of a success. It's a really, really great album. And it doesn't have that 90s thing where it wears out its welcome. I feel like it's just like a really solid, easy listen, and I liked it immediately. So Talk Show, happy to pick it up. I wasn't expecting to be able to find it as easily as I did, but it wasn't too difficult. Now this album is one that I took a bit of a chance on, but it was an educated guess because this artist, I have been listening to his other albums. I just hadn't got to this one yet, and I loved all the other albums. So this is the only one I was able to find, and this is Ben Kweller and his self-titled album. But I'm happy to report I have since listened to it, and I love it. Might be my favorite of his. I'm not sure. They're all really close, of those first three albums especially, and the fourth one's also really great. That was actually the first one I heard, his country album, and it led me to go back and check out his first few albums. I kind of remember him coming out, and I remember hearing songs at the time. For whatever reason, I just didn't get the album and I didn't really hear much more, but I was missing out because I just love his brand of just really catchy pop, power pop, whatever you want to call it. Just fantastic. So that's another one. Now, another recent discovery, and probably someone most people who are watching are probably unfamiliar with. I wasn't super familiar with him, but Benji Ferry. I'm not 100% sure how to say his name. I was doing a bit of a sort of a mini dive of the year 2009. I'm catching up on a lot of the 2000s years and going a little deeper. And I found his album from that year. And I loved it. It's my favorite album of the year. That album is called, it's got a very long title, Come Back to the Five and Dime, Bobby D, Bobby D. Actually was originally looking for that at the seller that I was looking through, but they didn't have it. They did have this one, which is his debut. And I also really like it. Come Back to the Five and Dime is my favorite, of course, but this one is pretty close. He's just immediately one of those artists that I feel is just someone that is special. You know, sometimes you hear an artist and you're like, oh, yes, this person, I'm going to love what they do. And he is that for me. Unfortunately, he only has 3 albums and he hasn't put out anything since 2016. So that might be all I ever hear, but I really enjoyed every bit of it. So yeah, I always love a good new discovery. Another album here from a fairly recent, I wouldn't say fairly recent discovery. I was aware of them, but a band I recently got into is Supergrass. I picked up some of their other albums, but this one, Road to Ruin, is one that I really love and one that has really grown on me the more I've listened to it. I just find their songs really catchy, and really just every album is solid in its own way. There's always some great songs and there's always some songs that I really love, and this one is no different. So happy to add it to the collection. And next up, another product of a dive that I've done over time. This one was a longer term one because it's a huge catalog, and that's Paul McCartney solo stuff. This is Chaos and Creation in the Backyard, which I wouldn't say took me by surprise when I heard it. I knew that it was well regarded and I was expecting it to be better than some of the stuff I've been hearing leading up to it, but it absolutely blew me away. I just loved it. Like, I don't know that I expected to like it as much as I did. As anyone who's heard his catalog knows, like the 80s and the 90s and early 2000s, there's some ups and downs for sure. He went in many different directions and wasn't always great. So to come back and hear this, which is from 2005, I believe. Yes, 2005, and have an album that kind of blows you away. That is always a special experience. You don't see that too often with artists. Not to say that artists can't come back and do great things later in their career, because they can, and they do sometimes. And Paul McCartney has here. So yeah, great album. Definitely check it out if you haven't. Another 1974 selection is Leonard Cohen and gosh, the glare. New song, New Skin for the Old Ceremony, which I'm a big Leonard Cohen fan, and this would be one of my favorite albums of his. Somewhere, it's definitely top 5. Putting them in order at the top is a little tough, but I do love this one. It does seem to be a bit divisive, which is a bit surprising to me, because to me, it's great. But anyway, I was surprised. I always think that I have it, but I didn't, and I finally got it. So it's always good to fill in those holes. Another more modern album, Dear Science by TV on the Radio, a band that I'm getting to know. I heard their first album a few years back. I wasn't really sure what to think of it, so I never really went back to them. But people I knew were listening to this album for a project that they were doing, so I was like, I should listen to it and see what it's all about. And I loved it. So happy to add it, happy to know them now and maybe listen to some more of their stuff. I think something new might be coming, so it's a good time to go back. They've been teasing something. So yeah, Dear Science, it's as great as everyone says it is. Nada Surf and Lucky is the next album I picked up. Just really like this by them. I think they're really an underrated band because people associate them with the one hit popular, which isn't really the best indication of their sound at all. They're a little more power pop for sure, and just more melodic and more interesting than that song would indicate. That song is a fun song. I always liked it. But it is kind of a novelty song, and that's not really the best indication of their sound. And this album, of the ones I've heard, I haven't heard everything, but this is the one that I like the best so far. So when I saw it was available, I was happy to pick it up. Another 2000 selection with Iron and Wine and The Shepherd's Dog. This is an album I've liked for a very long time, but I always only had a burnt CD of it and never had an actual copy. Revisited it last year when it was presented in an album of the week activity that I do with some friends, and really it reminded me of my love for it. So I'm happy to have been reacquainted with the album and to pick up a copy. Next up are a couple more classics, or classics in the sense of the broader scheme of things. Wish by The Cure. It's one of the last of my favorite Cure albums that I didn't already own. So I'm happy to pick it up and have it in my collection. It's Due Time. And another one that I cannot believe that I did not own. And I always kind of forgot that I didn't own. You know, sometimes you just assume you own these albums, but no, finally have Marquee Moon by Television, which I am shocked that I did not own before this, but now I finally do. Just a great album, obviously. We all know it. We all love it. And yeah, I finally have it. So into some records. I picked up this. This is a variety of trips. Some of them are from my local record store and some that I've ordered online. First off, I have two Supertramp albums and Crisis What Crisis and Even in the Quietest Moments. I recently did a dive of Supertramp. And there is a 5-album run of theirs that I think is really good. From Crime of the Century and Famous Last Words, and I would own all of those. I already own Crime of the Century and Breakfast in America, but it was time to fill in the gaps and get these two just solid albums. Of course, I like Breakfast and Crime of the Century more, but I do think these both have some great songs and are really solid albums that definitely need to own. So happy to have them now. Next up is another one that I took a bit of a chance on and I still haven't listened to. I have a good idea that I will enjoy it, and that is Glen Campbell and Rhinestone Cowboy. I like the song Rhinestone Cowboy a lot, and other albums of his around this time that I really like. So I expect to like this one at least somewhat. I don't expect it to be a fodder for a should it stay or should it go episode, but I guess you never know. So I should be listening to that soon to make sure. Next, I have a couple power pop classics. I've not really got too much into it on the channel, but I am a big power pop fan, especially the stuff from the 70s. And I love finding some those obscure gems, the stuff that wasn't necessarily hugely popular, but it's still really good. So there's nothing more that I love in bringing in one of those into my collection. So we have the Paley Brothers. I know this one's often regarded as a classic among fans of the genre. And I actually picked it up sort of by accident because I was buying the next one that I'm going to show. And they just, the same seller happened to have this for a really cheap price because the sleeve's not in the greatest condition, but the record is. So that's the main thing. So I think I got it for like $3. So you can't really turn that down, especially when it's not something you're going to see every day. It's just a really fun album from the time, power pop. It kind of reminds me, has a little bit of Beach Boys vibes to it a little bit too. So it's just a cool one to bring in. And the other one I brought the main one that I was buying is by the Beckys, which is a project of that Michael Brown from the Left Bank was involved in, but just a one-off power pop 70s album, solid good time. I first heard about it because the Lemon Twigs mentioned it in, I think, Shindig magazine. I'm a subscriber to that, so read that every month. And it made me curious, and I checked out all the projects that they were mentioning, and I just really, really liked this one. So I was happy to be able to pick it up for a reasonable price, as well as get the Paley Brothers one thrown in for even less. So it was just one of those good deals that you get, and you have to take advantage of. So two more, a little more modern, and two that I was surprised to find in my local record store because neither of these artists seem to be ones that, or one of the artists I've never seen around too much locally, and the other one's sort of an older album, but not super old, like in a classic sense. But anyway, Dr. Dog's Fate, another band recently really got into, did a dive, do a lot of dives of artists. Yeah, I'm always listening to music. So I really love them. This is one of my favorite albums by them. So I was really surprised and excited to see it locally and to be able to pick it up because I don't see their stuff too often, like I said, and I don't really see it too much for a reasonable price online. So I was really happy to get this one. It's just really, really cool. And then last but not least, we have Tied to a Star by J Mascis from 2014, which I did do a dive of that year a while back, and I absolutely just adored this album. Like, didn't really have high expectations again. He's always solid, he always puts out good stuff, but I didn't necessarily expect to love an album from 2014 by him, but I did. And then I was absolutely pleased to find it on vinyl locally. I was not expecting that either. So happy to say that it's in my collection now, and it might be one of my favorite albums by him solo. Obviously, Dinosaur Jr. has some major classics that pretty hard to rival, but yeah, this one it's just got some lovely stuff on it and some wonderful guitar playing as usual, and some really pretty stuff too. So yeah, happy to have that. And it's got a poster of the cover art, which is really nice. Like I just love the art, and to have like a bigger version of it, um, probably too big to pull out, but I always feel a little guilty wanting to hang the posters, but I mean, at the same time, you buy these to enjoy them. So I might find somewhere to put this because it's just so cool. So anyway, I don't know. Hauls, I'm not sure how, if they're interesting or if people want to see them. If it's something that you're interested in, let me know, or let me know some of the stuff that you've brought in recently. I always love to hear what people are buying and bringing into their homes. So even if it's got nothing to do with what I just brought in, want to hear about it. Yeah. So I have a couple things coming up soon that I've been working on. This is kind of just something to do in between. And talk about some of the stuff that I'm bringing in rather than focusing on the stuff I'm getting rid of all the time. Till next time. Bye.